Here there is a question that pertains to ethics, specifically living with virtue, having a virtuous life, as opposed to one that is off the hinges. This involves a whole lifetime of tweaking, understanding, trying to understand at first, of course, and all that comes with it when confronting the world, having to go about living your life. It's impossible for us not to be confronted with issues of ethics. What the Buddha taught in the form of sila, virtuous behavior, not just virtue, but behavior that is in line with a higher code of ethics. Now, more than ever in the world, we are confronted with a state of affairs which has done all in its power and is doing all that it is able to in order to eradicate the sense of ethics from us. Children are not being taught ethics. Virtue is completely bastardized. We have different sounding words, similar but different meaning, such as virtual reality. That has more of a weight on the psyche of individuals today than true virtue. We do have some mention of legality, laws or rules imposed upon us by outside forces, governments, states, etc., institutions. But those really have not much going on for them when it relates to the purity that virtue provides. Virtue is very personal, very, very personal. Rules, regulations, as I mentioned, legal things are not what maintains society when you really closely try to look at it. It is virtue. So when a person is relying on what the state designates or dictates to be correct, and solely on that function, and try to live one's life according to those quote-unquote standards provided by outside entities, outside from oneself, that is. Sooner or later we end up in a debacle as we do now in the world at large. Of course, we need to have some basic structures in place. And one might say that parents do provide that to a youngster, to a child. You might say schools do provide some very, very basic level of structure to build upon. But that's where it stays and that's where it dies oftentimes, because suddenly the focus is on the larger perspective as to what the social dynamic regards as being appropriate versus what is not. And that is very changeable given the times. In different time periods, societies had different rules and regulations which the public, societies, really adhere to. If not, it would be, at the cost of their lives if they didn't, right? And with that comes a lot of junk, a lot of ignorance. Because when you are being led as a society by what is dictated by the secular structures of society, or even institutionalized religions that are led by human beings in powerful positions, then you're asking for trouble as far as the humanity is concerned. And we see this again and again and again throughout documented human history. Legal doesn't make it Dhamma. Today, many obnoxious, many ridiculous things have become legal. And conversely, certain things that are essential for the healthy human being to function and to therefore bring about a healthy human society and therefore a healthy world have become illegal. So everything is topsy-turvy. How can a human being then, who genuinely brings with them some semblance of integrity from past lives, still beating in their hearts, how will they, when facing this world that's all over the place, all over the map, completely convoluted, has lost its North Star, how will such a human being truly A, function, and B, find their way to a healthier, more fuller and meaningful life that leads one to awakening, to deepening those wholesome roots within oneself that they have accumulated the merits of for many, many lifetimes. Now the good news is that legal, or whatever societies deem as being appropriate, abiding by the rules and regulations of itself, all that will be temporary, is temporary, because they're all superficial. Their impact is temporary, because they have nothing to do with the Dhamma, the order of things, the true, natural order of things. That is the domain of the Dhamma. And that is the domain of true ethics. What the Buddha called, again, Sila. No matter where we land in the cosmos, in our next birth, no matter which part of the, what realm of existence we find ourselves in, what rung of society, one thing will remain, for sure, pertinent for the improvement of oneself, for the development of yourself as a person, as an entity, no matter what kind of an entity. We all will continuously be asked to abide by the rules of sila. Those are the norms. I know I use the word rules because language is only, it's crippled. Language struggles to truly capture the meaning of things. You can never convey the meaning of things purely by the use of words, concepts, because they function on concepts. Again, the Dhamma is beyond that. Now, what is closer to the Dhamma? Well, the three trainings. The first of which is one's sila. And that, as I said in the beginning, is very personal. That you will take with you. Whatever momentum you develop in this life, and you will take that with you, the momentum of which will hopefully deepen and send down its roots within you to become really meaningful. They will, for lack of a better word, will become an underlying healthy tendency, trajectory, that no matter where you land in whatever decrepit or advanced society you land in, that will still help you maintain the course and develop further and further and further. We see this throughout history. We see this throughout the thousands of encounters that took place in the life of the Buddha with students, with people, with beings who came in. Some developed, some not so developed. Some very, very vulgar, decrepit, vile even. In the same time period, sitting next to individuals who were highly, highly developed, that does not come about because of the grace of some God. That does not result from some other being's influence upon you, and by that influence, somehow something happens in you and you become somebody else. That never happens. There needs to be an efforting, a process where you transform yourself. Someone might inspire you, encourage you. Their behavior, their words might move you. That's wonderful, and that is how it's supposed to be when you are in the presence of someone virtuous, wise. And by the way, those two go hand in hand. You will never find a person who's wise who happens to be non-virtuous. It is impossible. Never works. It's just publicity stunt. It's just some PR mechanism or some writer's wishful thinking, even if that writer happens to be separated from you by a few thousand years. Virtue is essential, is the backbone, is the skeletal system of wisdom. Without virtue, nothing happens. That's why societies come and go, depending on the presence or absence of virtue. You have so many examples of Egypt, ancient Egypt. Well, various ancient Egypts, by the way, depending on which time period or how far back you want to go. Cultures in Mesopotamia, Sumer, Babylonian Empire, Assyrian Empire, Indian Empire, Chinese, different empires and kingdoms. Central and South American. What happened? Where did these people go? You also have, obviously, Atlantis and other cultures that history books don't know of or not accept, but have come and gone, depending on the presence or absence of virtue, ethics. So ethics is not a course that you take, if you take, that is, because of, some course that, you take in a university or a college, or as a requirement, as a prerequisite course, let's say, to get a degree or something, or a job requirement, some type of thing like that, for you to advance in a career, or to impress others in a board meeting, or to go after individuals in a court system, legal system, by using some strategies of rhetoric to trap people so you can influence. Ethics is not about influencing either. Why? Because influencing as such is against the Dhamma. Usually, in a word like this, of course, to say the least. So all these things are outside of oneself. Ethics is propelled, impelled, instigated within oneself, and specifically within one's mind. Now, when you remove the presence of virtue from one's life, what then follows is a downhill series of regressions, basically, decline, corruption of the individual. So when we are approaching virtue, I'm giving several different platforms here for our own clarification as to how to approach it. Because in many, to the understanding of many people, it is very skewed, the understanding that people have of ethics, virtue. Because if you're coming from a typical Western way of understanding, what we have are basically imposed things like commandments or rules, and as a result we have some animosity, at least some resistance to such enforced impositions, basically. That is what I noticed people struggle with. I did struggle with that myself. So here, proper understanding, as always is the case, in studying the Dhamma, which is the study of life, has to be carefully looked at. And our own misconceptions about structure, misconceptions about ethics, about virtue, have to be removed by us looking at, such as this Q&A. I'm trying to respond to a question pertaining to ethics, pertaining to virtue, how to maintain it in a modern society, living in a modern society, or any society, because the structure doesn't change. Legal stuff change. Because, for example, if you're coming from a Judeo-Christian, Islamic background, an Abrahamic religion, let's say, which Western societies are typically influenced by, at least on some level nowadays, then you're going to have some issues, because on one hand, an entity, an institution, the government, some structure comes in and says, don't do this. But on the other, they do the opposite. If you look at the Bible, for example, you have the God of the Jews that say, if, I love you, this and that, but then on the other hand, go ahead and take over that country over there. Yeah, but it's full of people. Yeah, I'll give you permission. Go ahead. I'm giving it to you. Well, if you have at least a tiny little iota of some integrity in you, tiny, tiny, tiny little speck of what's supposed to be fair, an understanding of that, or appreciation of that, or love, you're going to have some issues with that, because, wait a minute, how come the attitude changed? The us and them mentality is very much skewed. So, you see modern versions of this. When you have someone in your life, personal life, and you speak to each other, and it could be a boss, it could be some type of a relationship. It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship or intimate relationship like that. But it could be, of course. Let's say both parties come to an agreement saying, I do not want this to happen. Let's agree that this doesn't happen. Or I will not lie to you. Okay? Or I'm not lying to you. Or I don't want you to lie to me. And you agree to that. And then 5 minutes later or 5 years later, you find out that that person who did not want you to lie to them has been lying to you. When you go and confront them with facts, and they admit that, yes, that's what they did, but then they come around and they say, well, that was different. No, a lie is a lie is a lie. That is not virtue. It's just going by what works and what is not discovered. And what works, by the way, what works for me, for my benefit. Legal systems today in the world are all about that. They don't think about the welfare of human beings, of the benefit, and what is favorably good for the masses, for posterity, for the well-being of the planet. There's always a hook, there's always something, somewhere, that's attached to rules being placed upon us, the public. It's never really for the welfare of the public. When you have human beings, entities who are in it for themselves and their own benefits and their own power, this is not in any way, shape, or form conspiracy. This is history. This is realism. Okay. It's too big of a issue to, or a fact to go and tackle. And that's not the objective here in sharing this. If you notice, I said ethics or virtue is all about the person. So let's look at that. So whatever you do to live in a society, you have to comply with the rules as best as possible, as long as it's not depriving it, as long as it's not impinging upon your own values, as long as it's not impinging on your own primal values, precepts, your own higher virtue. And by the way, no government will ever produce more valuable legal statutes and things like that that would be higher in importance than the virtue that one holds in one's heart. You have ultimate control over your life. Why? Because you have ultimate control over your mind. That is, if you maintain it, if you realize what's going on, if you realize that ultimately it is your responsibility to put into your mind either good or bad intentions. You are the one who has the ultimate control with saying or giving the go-ahead, the green light, to do or not do something. And doing in Buddhism does not mean physical action or even verbal action, as in speech or some form of communication, but it especially has to do, and starts from, that is, the action that takes place in the mind. And that is the first domain of virtue. Now, people usually have issues with virtue, or whether remorse, regret, I wish I didn't do this, or I'm having some struggles with this in my life, but they don't realize that it has its start in the mind. Specifically, your attitude towards the thing in question. And then we narrow it down to the rule, as in not to harm, or not to kill, or not to steal, or take anything that is not given to you, or not to engage in any sexual misconduct where someone's going to get hurt, or because of your desire to engage in some sexual behavior with someone, whether it's in fact even your body or someone else. Basically, if somebody found out about this sexual activity or sexual behavior, there's going to be suffering for people, including yourself, whether now or later. See how wide it is? How wide of a scope that presents? And similarly with wrong speech, false speech, lying, deceiving, making things sound different than what they truly are because of some benefit somewhere for you or someone, where you're tweaking reality, you're tweaking the truth of what has happened or is happening so you gain some benefit. Where if the truth is truly revealed, the outcome would be totally different, and you would not get that advantage. There you go, that's another bigger scope of understanding deception, lies, speaking falsehood, engaging in the consumption of alcohol or drugs. Well, this takes us back to what I was mentioning earlier about things can become legal all of a sudden. Well, why do you think the whole planet's population are so dumb now, so numb now? There's so much vile behavior taking place. There's genocide being committed in Palestine. And what's happening? Nobody's marching on the streets saying, stop, and bringing the whole mechanism of terror to a halting stop. People are raising a voice, this and that, writing this, that, articles, news, this. But essentially, the planet is not outraged that today, in the 21st century, genocide is being committed in front of our eyes. And what do? We switch the channel. Who does that? A public that has gone numb, is not able to perceive the magnitude of the atrocity. Why? Because we have lowered our standards. So virtue is internally generated and maintained internally. This is something that needs to be understood. It's not imposed upon by one's teacher, let's say a bhikkhu, enforcing it. No. I was mentioning this to someone who's not a Buddhist, and he was just curious about what is, the proper protocol of living in life, for a Buddhist. What does the Buddha teach? So from the basics, you start with, as the Buddha would teach, you start with speaking about the wonders of generosity, of dana, to help the person remove the stains of miserliness and stains of stinginess from one's heart, which are very difficult to remove. So the Buddha had to teach so many times, so many people, especially the wealthy ones, for some reason, of the benefits of dana, of generosity, non-stinginess. But then he would teach, once the person has gotten it, understood it, starts living according to that, then the Buddha would teach them the virtue part of the teachings. And that is sila. That's the first training, official training. The second training is purification of the mind through the practice of samadhi, through the practice of basic sati, mindfulness, full awareness, which is not as simple as people make it out to be. Why? Because it requires sustaining, just like sila requires sustaining. Sustaining what? Sustaining effort. Now, the teacher is not in your head. The teacher is not holding your hand. The teacher is not holding a stick or a rod over your head to hit you with it because you broke a sila, because he's not in your mind. You are the one who is executing. You are the one who's doing. You are the one who's really struggling with, should I not, should I not. Now, the problem is that many of us fall back into our own ways, ancient ways, antiquated ways of looking at rules, because that's where we make the confusion, have the confusion. We think of sila as some form of rule and regulation imposed upon us, as in the form of commandments. Don't do this. If you do this, all hell's going to break loose. I'm going to come down on you with the sledgehammer, all that kind of jazz. None of that is in the teachings of the Buddha. None. Why? Because they limit life. They obstruct growth. They make us cringe and run away. Especially in that heated moment when we're really struggling. In those moments where the person is struggling to do what is right versus wrong, they're already fighting their own passions, as well as whatever is there in front of them, all those influences around them. And boy, do we have influences today. You carry one, a bag of influences, a tornado of influences in your hand called a smartphone, and everything else. You look up away from your phone, and all of a sudden there's a big billboard in front of you with dazzling, bright, captivating, seductive, provocative lights and images that engage all your senses. And they've been perfecting it to the point where they leave some remnants of theirs in your mind Long after you've walked away from the billboard, you've gone home, you're trying to sleep, guess what's playing? Because there's all subliminal messages that have been also displayed, but they were going too fast for your conscious brain to pick up. But your subconscious did. This is not, conspiracy theory. This is a fact. If you've read a few books, meaningful books, it's there. If you pay attention to what's happening in your life, and plus check in with yourself, see the truth of what I'm saying in your life. Otherwise, whatever you saw should have just ended there at the seeing. But no, in spite of you, you're still thinking about it, and you're wondering why. Because you're constantly being bombarded, you're being manipulated. I've mentioned this. This is not new. When you look into your phone, you're looking at a screen that's showing you some images, news, some search that you put in, on some search engine. You're just curious about something. And then a series of images pop, videos pop, and you're scrolling. You think you're scrolling. Your eyes are, as well as your facial features, are being studied very well by the cameras that are turned towards you from your screen, from your phone, to dictate your next move and to anticipate. In fact, preemptively have a series of other things, images, news pieces, whatever, to grab your attention next. Anticipating your next move and providing you products, things, and especially influences. Ways to influence you further and further. Remember the numb society I mentioned? That's how you get a numb, dumb society. And that's what you're confronting. Those are some of the influences, some of the factors that you are facing. So it's not just as the case was at the time of the Buddha, where the person was facing their, you can call them natural hindrances or obstructions, those passions, those drives, those just the mind working against you because of bad training or no training. So in addition to all those hurdles, what we call nivarana, obstructions, hindrances, that keep you spiraling downward, in addition to those, you are now dealing with external forces working against you. So this is the time period in which we desperately need to include virtue in the upbringing of a child. Not just a child, a teenager, a young adult, and everybody in between. We cannot maintain this course without virtue. If it weren't important, the Buddha would not have listed it as the first of the trainings, the 3 trainings. So societies, governments, secular institutions, as well as religious institutions, they are geared. On the surface, they say, ethics, they use big lofty terms, this and that. And today, modern day corporations have been, the baton has been passed to them. It's no longer the church or the organized religion. It's no longer even the political entity, these corporations that run the world. They use some of these terminology, which is quite grotesque. But if you don't know your virtue from your rules imposed upon you by society, legal stuff, etc., then you will fall for that, as the rest of the 8.5 or almost 9 billion people do. So how many people actually can distinguish the difference? The difference is between the two. Again, the transformation is and will always be taking place within the person first. And that's where it matters, by the way. Society might catch up or might not. We have had 2,600 years ago a being that came from our midst, a human being who became the Buddha. Imagine, which is such a rare, rare occurrence. The purest being ever. And what did we do? What did the world do? What did humanity do? His contemporaries, they still went after him. His own student tried to kill him at least 3 times. People slung curse words, abusive words, lies, deceptions, made him come out as this terrible person. Lies were weaved around him, which sooner or later were exposed for what they were. And then, less than 500 years later, the teaching proper started to decline. Other elements were brought in. Other elements were brought in. And it's a miracle that we still have the Dhamma in some form. But if we want to continue it, we have to maintain a proper understanding of virtue within us first. Develop a higher understanding and try to maintain it. Try to maintain it. So how? This is the how-to part of the answer. Make sure that whatever decisions you make pertaining to your virtue, or basically your life, so if you're going to do something, make sure that it's being done with you being comfortable with it. You can't do that without having sati. You can't do that without having mindfulness. That's the first, right? That's got to be there. So sati will be the one that tells you, hey, why are we agitated? Why am I rushing through my words? Why are my hands turned into a fist? Why am I agitated? Why is my heart beating so fast? I just want to do this, say this, drink this, that, whatever. I just want to say yes when I really want to say no. That means you're under the influence. Under the influence of what? Compulsion, impulsiveness, repeating patterns of yesterday. In those moments when you're very hot, you're really feeling agitated, just go ahead and mentally say, okay, after I've done this, let's imagine I've already done this without first having done it. So you first will imagine yourself forward in time. Let's say an hour after you've done this, you've said this. How do you feel? Oh, I feel terrible. I feel regret. I feel remorse. Okay, you just gave yourself a dose of what's going to come. Why? Because of the fact that you've gone through that. So you preemptively went into your future and saw what you will be experiencing. Okay. And then come back to the present. How does it feel, the fact that you haven't done it yet? There needs to be a little bit less tension. But because the fact that you're always under the influence, there's things bombarding you. Images, sounds, friends maybe forcing you to have that glass of wine or that beer. Or, hey, try this drug. Oh yeah, it's good for you. Then now actually they're not even calling it drugs because it has a bad connotation. I remember when I was a kid, they started selling, the adults would smoke, and of course the parents were not allowing the kids to smoke, but the parents were giving us money to go and buy these fake packets of cigarette packets, but they were made of candy. They, for all intents and purposes, they looked like a cigarette pack. And we had different brands among us. And we would pretend to be smoking, and then we would eat the inside, the candy, unwrap it, each of those quote-unquote cigarettes. Well, this is basic strategy of influence. Train the person, train them when they're young. Train them when they're young, so they're hooked. So it won't be such a stretch for them to go for the real thing. And my cousins, I saw them one day, they were really smoking. I never smoked. I found it to be disgusting to put that thing in your mouth and to have the fingers become all stained and the teeth and this bad, terrible smell. As if somebody died there. I felt disgusted. So, influence. Now, as an adult, when you're confronting your own drive, your so-called drive, because it's highly influenced by previous behavior. So this is where you need to, instead of being convinced that, yeah, I'll do this and everything's going to be okay. When deep down you know, based on your past experiences, that they don't amount to okay. That's why you say, okay, I'm feeling tight, I'm feeling tension, and what do I need to do? So once you discover that in an hour or so, or in a minute after having done this, you're going to feel pain, stop. You gave yourself a preview of what's to come. Then physically change your location. This is the next step. So if you found yourself forced to say yes when your friends say, hey, let's go to the bar, let's go to the pub, or let's try this, and you know that you really don't want that. That really not wanting that means it's coming from you. And this comes from the drive to please others. Well, what kind of a situation are you creating? Is that really coming from a good place? So the action that you're going to commit has everything to do with the intention behind it. And that's what we're doing. We're looking at the intention. What is influencing this intention to come about? Oh, not to refuse someone else. As if you have all the time in the world to make up for it. No, you don't. And plus you're going to be in pain afterwards when the situation disassembles, dismantles, and your friends are gone, or you're not in that location anymore and time has passed. You are now stuck in the gunk of regret. So the practice of Dhamma is all about living free, is all about living with integrity, happiness. So by you practicing Sila, you are maintaining that trajectory so you will have more happiness and more safety. That's where true safety comes from, not just because of rules and regulations imposed upon you, even if you're the one who's imposing. There has to be an understanding why you're practicing Sila, why you're practicing virtue. Ethics, that's where real ethics are. That's where they originate. They spring from that, the place within you. And this has a lot to do with your resilience. And smarts, and willingness to really withstand whatever storms that come at you. But ideally, some people respond differently. But we have to be able to remove ourselves from that scene initially. Physically, you have to excuse yourself. Before you go ahead and say, you put your hand on the glass and say, no, I don't want anything, I just want water. Now you have to be able to withstand the mockery or the playful, maybe even seemingly, comments that you might hear from your friends that say, oh, come on, what do you want, milk? You want water? Really? All that stuff. Some people will not be able to handle that. Or trying to please your friends, saying, well, I don't want to stand out like a sore thumb, so let me just say yes. I'm not going to enjoy it, I know that, but I'm just doing this for my friends. Yeah? What's going to happen afterwards when your friends are not there, when you're by yourself? Driving home, if you can. I'm just giving one or two examples here, so the particulars aren't important, but the whole mechanism that is at play is. So in a society that has been pulling out from its roots, the thing that makes us human, the thing that makes us civilized, meaning the ethical structure that has been undermined because people have been trusting the state, people have been trusting the religion as such, the institutionalized governing bodies. No governing body will help you really when it comes to living with purity and virtue. None. Even the Buddha had to, he put these mechanisms in place so people decide, the individual decides. I was mentioning about a bhikkhu giving these, let's say, when a student, I was mentioning about this person who was asking me about the Buddhist structure on ethics and virtue, and I said, well, for lay people we have 5 precepts, and he was asking what are these? So I listed all the 5, and he had a whole series of questions as was expected. But I said, oh, by the way, because his reference was the commandments, because that's what he had learned when he was a child through the Bible. I said, no, there's no connection to that, because when you break sila, when you break your precepts, any of these 5, you're not going to be punished by someone else, by the instructor or the teacher in this case, who has given that to you, nor by a higher entity. There is no higher entity that will come and punish you like that. The punishment will come first because of you having not had hiri and ottappa. One is wise inner moral shame, the other one is wise inner moral fear. These two, the Buddha says, when they are no longer in society, they're not being brought into and lived by the person in society, there won't be a society left. And that's what we have in the world. That's what we have in the world. People in countries, governments in Europe, United States, other places, they're ready to go to war. World War III, imagine that. As I mentioned earlier, the Israelis have been committing genocide and no one's been doing anything. Not even a slap at the back of the hand. Nothing. Why? People don't have any ethics left. And I told this gentleman, I said, by the way, we never give it wholesale. He was like wondering, what do you mean? I said, For example, if a person decides to take the 5 precepts, they have to come, for example, if they approach me as a bhikkhu, and they ask me, oh Bhante, could you give me the 5, because that's how it works. You have to go to a teacher, a Buddhist monk, a bhikkhu proper, to receive the 5 precepts. He says, okay. And I said, no, it doesn't work that fast because you have to ask 3 times. 3 times, he said? I said, yes, 3 times. But why? To make you see the value of this. You're not going to find me trying to pull your arms, twist your arms and try to convince you. Oh, come, take the 5 precepts. It doesn't work like that. Because once you have taken the 5 precepts and you said, yes, Bhante, I undertake to do the training to continue working and purifying myself through these 5 precepts, as well as practice meditation, etc., you're going to be most of the time by yourself. The teacher will not be there. You might never see them again, by the way, ever. But whether you have virtue in your functioning in you, basically, or not, it will be completely dependent upon you. How resolutely do you want to continue? And this has everything to do with you wanting to see yourself happy. Most people don't know what that is. They don't know what that looks like, let alone what that feels like. Because we have become comfortable with feeling anxiety. Remember I was saying about being surrounded by so many imposing influences where you become impulsive, compulsive, and do something that you're going to hit yourself for. That has become the norm. But that is not the norm. That is not healthy. So if you convince yourself that to be in a constant state of strife, being tossed around, pulled this way and that state to be normal, there's a problem. So here's where you have to really focus in, be mindful of what it feels to be at ease, to be okay with yourself. Do you see the meaning now? Better understanding of what it means to have a personal trajectory, that sila happens within you. Well, within you, in the context of you feeling okay with yourself, calm, open, tranquil, loving, truly loving. And when you come from that place, you start seeing, oh, the meaning of accountability. Then you start really enjoying the meaning and how it feels when you move forward in time and you see that you did not do that action. You did not say that thing that was going to end up making you feel remorseful. You didn't do it at all. And now you're basking in that wonderful, wonderful state. And you experience bigger capacities of metta, loving kindness. Now you develop genuine compassion. Compassion that doesn't come because you keep repeating to yourself, may all beings be happy, may all beings be, all this and that jazz. You feel it. You know it. You know what it feels, loving kindness, in you, for you. And nothing bad could ever come from that state. Nobody who's ever felt metta, truly, can go out and harm another person. Doesn't work. Because the person has tasted something wondrous. So when you're practicing sila, you're coming from there. Not because your Bhante said so, not because the government officials have said that if you do, No. So how many people can actually practice that? Let's start with you. Okay? And see the changes that will take place. So you are the litmus test. You are the gauge You practice sila to feel happy, to feel free, to feel light. Same thing with practicing generosity, practicing meditation, trying to listen to the words of the Buddha, to understand the Dhamma, to gain wisdom. That's what wisdom brings. That's what wisdom promises and delivers. That's where the true transformation takes place, and you become totally different from moment to moment, always, constantly experiencing the meaning of parisuddhiya, which is purification. Sukhi Hotu.